Happy Sunday, everybody. I'm Leslie Frank with Frank Family Vineyards, and welcome to our virtual tasting on this, well, it's a rainy Sunday afternoon. Joining us, our winemaker and general manager, Todd Graff, and founder of Frank Family Vineyards, and my wonderful husband, Rich Frank, who is prepared for the rain. Now, you guys are sitting outside. Right behind you is our Winston Hill Vineyard property in Rutherford. And about 10 minutes ago, we had blue skies, and we thought we're going to check this for the next hour when we do our tasting. We'll sit outside, we'll enjoy the scenery, and of course, like clockwork, the rain starts. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. It was beautiful 15 minutes ago. We'll try to do this. If it gets really bad, we'll take a break and head inside.
Okay, so Todd, why don't you run through what you're going to be tasting for our followers today?
Great. Well, we're going to start off with our Chardonnay, our 2018. Welcome, and I hope you're all safe and healthy. And again, thanks for joining us. And apologies if it wasn't so smooth yesterday, but we're here to do it again, and it's live. So if you started with us yesterday, you'll get a little bit of a different story. 2018 Chardonnay, all grown in Carneros, which is the southern end of the Napa Valley, Napa and Sonoma sides. The Carneros is what connects the two valleys together. It's the coolest region of the Napa Valley, near San Pablo Bay. We have 80 acres down there called the Lewis Vineyard, but we also buy fruit from some of well-known established families. And on the Napa side, it's Lee Hudson, it's the Beckstoffer family. We get some from the Garvey family. On the Sonoma side, the San Giacomo family is our largest supplier of Chardonnay. All great growers, and we've had long-term relationships with them. The key to Carneros is the cool climate. It's the coolest part of the Napa Valley, as I said. It's where Napa, you'd be out in a t-shirt and shorts, and Carneros in the evenings, you're usually putting on a sweater or sweatshirt of some sort. So much different temperature down there. And that retains the fruit, the acidity in the grapes. We try to pick them all at night, if possible, so the fruit can come as cold as possible. That's for better winemaking. The next step really comes along in the processing of the fruit and getting the juice from the grapes to the barrels. So we call that pressing. We do a pressing cycle similar to the champagne cycles of Europe, where we gently squeeze and we take different press cuts. Our first 10 gallons per ton are separated. Then we take the heart fraction out, which is about 100 to 120 gallons per ton. And then we have the heavy pressing. We combine that heavy pressing with the first 10 gallons per ton, because that's usually where the vineyard dust is, the juice that's hanging in the bins, and that's been sitting around for a while. We want that to go into the heavy press, and we'll treat that a little differently than the free run that goes direct to the barrel, fermented, and aged in the barrel for about 9 months. And fermentation is just the process of converting the sugar and the grape juice to alcohol. Very simple. And then it's the aging and the maturation in barrels that kind of gives it our style and flavor. We're a French oak house, so all our barrels are French oak. For this blend, it's 100% barrel fermented, of which about a third are new every vintage, and thus 1/3 once used, 1/3 twice used. So that's where we're getting that barrel balance, I would call it. A little spice, a little caramel. We still are able to smell the fruit. And please, at home, if you got a glass in front of you, dig in.
We should
I just want to remind everybody who's watching us that there is a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions for Todd or Rich or myself, please feel free to email us your question. And thanks, Daryl Frank, for chiming in. Daryl's watching. Rich's son in Los Angeles and the family. Hi to the family. Hope you're staying safe. I know you are. And he says, Todd, yum. Cheers, Daryl and Vanessa, kids.
Relative to that,
That
Todd,
little chat button, that little Q&A, send us your questions.
okay, Todd, tell us a little bit about how you try to make the wine consistent from year to year.
Great. So a lot of it has to do with our lovely weather here in California, Napa Valley. Mother Nature is very generous to us most years. So we have consistent climate. And the other key is the consistent growers and consistent people. We've got the same winemaking team here for several years. The same growers we've been buying from. And then it's the style. You aim for a style when you're trying to make a wine. And our family style is this balance with fruit, with complexity, some acidity, some length. If you taste this wine, hopefully you'll be able to taste the wine for many seconds after swallowing. So you have that philosophy to aim for that wine in the bottle, and all your decisions before that are all based on your final outcome.
And Mother Nature changes things every year because of the temperature each year, the amount of rain. Believe it or not, we've been praying for rain in Napa since January. We set up here this morning and the sun was out, sort of out and in. And as soon as this was going on the air, it started drizzling. So hopefully it'll go away. If we fade out, we'll run inside and continue from in there. But this is just typical of Napa. It comes and it goes. But overall, we have some of the best climate in the world to be able to grow grapes.
It is. It's a Mediterranean climate. So we get all rain in the winter and it's dry through the growing season. So it's optimal grapes. We would like more rain, actually. We're about 50% our normal rainfall for a year. And we were hoping this weekend would be a big one, but it really didn't turn out to be much. And I think we're going to have our first week of spring next week and probably be mid 70s with sun. So it'll be great living weather, which we're very spoiled with, but we could probably use a good dousing still to charge the soil before all the bud break happens. And bud break is when the shoots come out. Behind us is a Cabernet vineyard, and up close you can see the buds just starting to break. They look like little popcorn actually at this time. We call it the popcorn phase. But down at Carneros, where the Chardonnay and Pinot are coming, those are earlier ripening varieties, and they bud break earlier also. So bud break is going on in Carneros, and you could have a couple inch shoots by now down there. So you can really see the difference of varietal and location at this time of year.
I just want to say that we're getting a lot of comments and questions from our viewers today, and we really appreciate it because, like you, we're holed up at home and doing this quarantine thing for our own safety and for the safety of everyone else. But it's a way for us to connect with you, and so we really appreciate you being here with us today. I know that many of you didn't have an opportunity. We had some issues with Zoom yesterday capping us, and well, hey, we're back today. So cheers to that. Cheers to another day. Heidi Borozewski, and if I butchered your name, I apologize, but you know who you are. Heidi says, thanks for doing this. We almost feel like we're there with you. And that's the whole purpose. So thank you, Heidi. Michael Taylor says, thanks for having us the second day in a row here at a lake in Michigan, and it's great and windy, so the tasting is great. As always, the Chardonnay is divine. Thank you, Michael, for that comment. And David Marino has a question for you, Todd. Do you think the fires and the smoke will have an effect on the wines? Good question.
Yeah, so that is a good question. We'll probably dive into that. I guess we can start right here. So the 18 vintage Napa Valley was saved from any fire. So if you're talking about short term, the wines we're tasting today had no fires near them. So the 18 vintage, which the Chardonnay and Pinot are coming from, very good, mild season at the, so really no fires till very, very late. And we were all picked, and it was a very tragic fire up north, and some smoke did blow down to the Napa Valley, but at the end of harvest, and everybody was done by that time when the terrible Paradise Fire happened. At 16, we were pretty fine also. And similar vintage, very very mild temperatures, average actually. And as I said yesterday, about the only thing we want average around the winery is the weather. We just want it nice, calm, and smooth. And both these two vintages we're talking about were very smooth, and it allowed us on this 18 very vintage from Mother Nature Cabernet. We picked it all the way into mid-November, and usually we're finished the first part of November. And if we didn't have that extra 2 weeks, we wouldn't have been able to get it all in. So if we would have had early rains, we could have had a disaster in the 18 vintage. But as it was, it stayed nice all the way through the middle of November. So there was no, and the tanks were all full in October. So we had to wait till we could get them empty and refill. And the weather held out for us perfectly. So back to the fire, on a long-term basis, there's really no effect unless the vine burns so much it dies. But the smoke blows through and the valley clears up, and there's no effect to the next vintage after that. And then if you want to talk about the 17 fire.
We can talk about the 17.
Yeah, right. And to that point, Rich, before you answer, Tony Quadros, who's joining us for a second day. Thank you, Tony. He has a question for you, Rich. Rich, you mentioned yesterday that after October 8th, 2017, no grapes of ours were used. And is this for all of our wines or just for certain varietals?
It's a good question. In 17, all of the Chardonnay from us and everybody else, and all of the Pinot Noir was picked. So that was in the barn. Then Cabernet started being picked, the various and other red wines. And most of the people, including us, got their reserve wines off the vines first. They're always, not always the pick, but they generally are. And then we moved into what we call our Napa level wines. And we had picked some of that, and then the fires came on October 8th. And we separated those grapes. We separated that wine when Todd made it, and then we tasted it after it was made over and over and over again in blind tastings with our other winemakers around, with just people coming into the winery. And I have to tell you why I didn't taste anything, any type of smoke taint. Todd did. He has a much better palate than I have. And so did some of the people in our wine staff, our wine production staff. So we separated that wine. It was about 17,000 cases worth, and we sold it off. And so we can promise everybody that not one grape that was harvested after October 8th is in any Frank family wine. Other people may have done the same or differently after October 8th, but for Frank family, you can be assured that nothing from the fires will affect any one of our wines ever. So hopefully that answers your question there on that. Should we move on to next wine?
Sure. Any more questions on Chardonnay before we move on? I think, well, let's talk style a little bit about the, again, as you're tasting at home, I hope you are. And again, if you don't have a Frank family bottle, open any bottle today and just join us. And I'm going to talk in general terms, but for our style though, we like a balanced style. We want fruit to be up front, but we also want the creamy texture, the structure the barrels will give, and the nice length the acidity gives. So I hope you see that in the wine. Oh, there's Leslie. Do you want to question?
Yep, we have more questions. So Michael Taylor has another question. He says, why Pinot and Chardonnay and Carneros and Cab further north? Is it because of the temperatures?
Correct.
Great question.
So Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are cooler climate varieties originating in the windy region of France and now have traveled around the world. So in Napa, the Carneros is our coolest region. For us, Cabernet Sauvignon does really great from the city of Napa north to Calistoga, which is the majority of the valley, and then up in the hills and sides. So it's definitely a regional preference. Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, again, like cooler climate. Cabernet, a little warmer climate.
You see this also in France. Burgundy, we call everything by the grape name. Over there, they call it by the region. Burgundy is cooler. Bordeaux is warmer, and so get those grapes there. Actually, just a little story, because I think we have a little bit of time. Napa Valley back in the early 90s had an infestation of phylloxera. It's a little louse that kills the roots of the vines. And it killed many of the vines here in the valley. And up until then, the valley had been planted by people years ago, and they really weren't sure what grew best in each area. So if you had 40 acres and you were a winemaker or a grower back then, you might have had 10 acres of Pinot and 10 acres of Chardonnay and 10 acres of Cabernet and 10 acres of Merlot. By the time we got to the early 90s, we knew that the red wines grew better in the upper part of the valley, where it was warmer, and Chardonnay and Pinot would grow better down in the south part of the valley in Carneros. So when everybody was forced to replant, we replanted in the area that we knew those particular grapes grew better. So what was a disaster in the early 90s of forcing everybody to replant became what I believe made the valley what it is today. And that is the right grapes are planted in the right areas. And that's why Napa wines all over started becoming even better. And my simple thing that I ask people to think about is, think about Carneros being Burgundy and from Yountville North being Bordeaux. So we have the two areas of France within 30 miles here in Napa Valley.
Great analogy, Rich. Monique Shaw has two questions. One is, what is usually the first grape that you pick in harvest during harvest season, and why? And what is the hardest thing to do during harvest season, Todd?
So I'll answer the second one first. It's the hardest thing is finding time to get some sleep or some free time. Harvest is usually our most active period. So we're on Mother Nature's schedule. We're sane and safe, but we're on call the whole time and just keeping up with the harvest and picking as the grapes are ripe. The first thing we pick, which is kind of fun, is we do sparkling wine. So it's nice to talk about that, even though we're not tasting it today. It's a passion of mine. It's become a great program in our winery. So we do a Blanc de Blanc made from Chardonnay. It's all Carneros also. So again, the cooler climate of Napa Valley. We do Blanc de Blanc, as I said, Brut Rosé, so Pinot Noir based. And then we have the Lady Edith, named after Rich's mother. Edith is our Tête de Cuvée, aged for up to 8 years on the yeast, a little bit of fermentation, a lot more complexity to be the best of the best. And then we do a fun, sparkling Pinot Noir called Rouge. And it's really pretty, about the same colors as Pinot Noir. All those other ones, they're minimum age of 3 to 4 years. And so they're very complex, but very good energy, and they're great wine. So that's our focus for usually the last 2 weeks of August, usually, if we're lucky. We usually have everything ready to go first part of August, hope, and then if needed, we're ready. But sparkling wine usually the end of August, and Pinot Noir and Chardonnay hit the 1st of September. As soon as we get our hopes up, we're going to get Labor Day off. Those get vanished immediately, and then we're picking. Both these wines were harvested almost from the beginning of September to the end of September.
And they were asking, what was one of your toughest things? And I know you've said in the past, deciding when.
So the real answer versus finding sleep. So yes, the picking decisions, the probably the most difficult decision I probably make all year. Because if you do that right, everything's going to go your way. The majority of things are going to go your way the rest of the year. If you make a bad pick decision, then you're just pushing the rock up a hill the whole time. So as I say, it's always very easy to pick early and it's very easy to pick late. It's hard to pick perfect. And when you're visiting over, depending on the variety, but this Chardonnay has 40 different vineyards in it. The Pinot Noir has 25 different vineyards in it. So you have to be on top of those. And I like to use the analogy of just eating a fruit in the backyard. You go out and bite take an apple off the tree, and if you bite it and you almost chip your tooth, you know it's not ready, obviously. But you come back in a month and they're all rotten on the ground, you know it's too late. There's a day or 2 days or a half a week that when you bite that apple, the juice just goes all over your face and you know it's perfect. That's what we try to do in every vineyard we go to. And so most of my day, especially during harvest, every morning is in the vineyard.
So Todd, Susan Risk wants to know, if this year stays dry, how will that impact the grapes, the wine, and the taste?
If I missed if what stays dry?
The year, if we have a dry growing season, how will that impact the wine?
Correct. Well, we do kind of want to moderate. Once the vines start growing and any fruit comes on, we don't want rain. Most vineyards are set up with reservoirs in them. Vineyards have wells in them that they can pump and store water, so we can still irrigate if needed. If we've had a big rainy winter, which we really haven't this year, some of us can make it all the way through without any water. So, but come June, we want it pretty dry from there on out. And then if we need to irrigate, we have the system to do it. And even down at Carneros, there's a great system now that we're all tied into a line with reclaimed water that we can get if needed. We don't have to, but if we do need it, we're protected. It's kind of like a big insurance policy if it's a really dry year.
We'll talk about the Pinot a little bit.
All right.
You should be getting.
Please talk about the Pinot, because I think a few of our viewers they say the Chardonnay, Michael Taylor says the Chardonnay is divine, and he's on to the Pinot.
Wasting no time. That's right. Good. Yeah.
We only have an hour to get rid of all this stuff.
Right.
So Pinot Noir, it's a sibling of the Chardonnay. Same region, Carneros. Rich kind of made it an example of, if you have 40 acres, you might have 10 acres of a variety in this. So a lot of people in Carneros do that, but Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are the two predominant varieties down there. So we get all our Chardonnay from there. Similar growers, Beckstoffers, our vineyard at Lewis Vineyard down on Buckley Station Road, the San Giacomo family, growing great grapes. So the majority of the fruit comes from them. And here, winemaking differs a little bit from white to red. For white, we're trying to press the juice away from the berries as quickly as possible. With reds, we destem them, then they go into a vat, a tank, and then we ferment with the skins. And that's where we extract beautiful colors and structures and textures. And as you see through this tasting, if you're following along, the Pinot Noir is going to be a little lighter red, where the Cabernet is a little more full-bodied. That's natural to the variety. But so this wine will be cold, so we just let it sit on the skins for about 4 or 5 days and do nothing. It's kind of like putting a tea bag in the water and just letting it sit. It's iced tea, basically, versus a hot tea. And we want to extract very gently by having the cold soak. And then after that, start the fermentation. Fermentation's the same. We're just converting the sugar to alcohol. And then we're macerating we're mixing the tank over and around a few times a day to get all that color and body out of the skins. And then it'll come time to press that wine, usually about 2 weeks later. And then we do the same thing, press cuts for the red wine. We'll press to a certain level, and then when we start really squeezing hard, we separate that and keep it separate.
Okay, why is squeezing hard bad?
It's not bad. It's the best quality juice or wine is separated is in the pulp between the skins and the seeds. So you don't want to squeeze the skins and seeds super hard, but you want to get all the wine out of them. You want it dry. So at the end, you are squeezing closer to the skins and the seeds, and that'll have more of the phenolics, the astringency that you can taste in some wines.
One thing I want to jump in, because you mentioned in our Lewis vineyard, today's like a special day. Lewis is my oldest grandson. Today happens to be his 22nd birthday. He's in Rhode Island, working at a restaurant and studying at
Johnson and Wales.
Johnson and Wales to be a chef. I don't know if he's watching, but I wanted to say happy birthday. I can't believe I have a 22-year-old grandson, but we've named all the vineyards after the first vineyard here, Winston Hill, which I'll talk about in a second, after our grandchildren. And Lewis was the first. And happy birthday, Lewis.
Happy birthday, Lewis. So this is a question we hear a lot in the tasting room, and Helene Raphael, thank you for asking this question. First of all, Helene says she's excited that we're revisiting the wines today because she couldn't get into the tasting yesterday. But she opened up her Chardonnay yesterday, Todd, and she had a little bit left today for the tasting. But her question is, how long can you keep a Chardonnay in the refrigerator? It's a great question, Helene.
That is a good question, and good on you, Helene, that you have the willpower not to drink it all. I think we drank all ours, and we opened new ones today. So I think we're a little, we have a little more inventory, I guess. Once you open a wine, don't worry about letting it sit out overnight. And you taste it. If you like it, you'll know the wines will oxidize. And what oxidation means, maybe instead of fresh fruit, you'll see more soy or something like that, or caramel, or Chardonnay may turn a little brown, maybe even a little, but that's going to take a while. But if you lose that fresh fruit, you'll know it. But I have no issue with wine sitting on the counter for 3 days at all. And it might be, if you see it different, then you get a new bottle. I try not to put it in the refrigerator, and this is more of a science project. It's just that oxygen absorbs in colder liquids. So the oxygen in the headspace of that partial bottle will go into solution at colder temperatures. What I do then is right before you want to drink, maybe just stick it in for a half hour so it's the level you want it. I also advise, I don't drink my Chardonnays ice cold. I'll take the sparkling wines, champagnes, white wines. I take them out of the refrigerator at least 30 minutes before I want to drink them. So I don't like them ice cold. And then the same with reds. Reds are a little more protected because of those phenolics I talked about. There's gadgets involved. You can spray argon gas into them and help protect. You can, I don't know how reliable pumping the gas out. There's Corvan that you put a needle through the cork and you kind of push gas into it and it comes out and it protects it after that. So there's several. If you're doing a lot of partial bottles, you should look into a Corvan or something, or some inert gas to spray into it. But if it's just once in a blue moon, I just open it the next day. And then the other thing, if you are a half bottle person, half bottles are great. 375s, most wineries sell, and we sell 375s in all these varietals, and they're great if you know, or especially if you're home and somebody wants white and somebody wants red, or you want a glass of each. 375s are a great way to go also.
And all I want to say is I've never had that problem because I don't understand not finishing a bottle that night. There's no reason to go to bed and leave something over, but that's just me. Okay, Leslie.
And there you have it from Rich Frank himself. Well, while we're doing some shout out to family, I want to do a special hello to my brother David Miller and his wife Shannon. They live in Southern Ontario in Canada, and they have a question, Todd, because obviously they don't have access to as many wonderful California wines as we do. So they have their own wine region, and they have something called a Baco Noir, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, a Baco Noir. And the question is, are you familiar with it? And what is the difference between a Pinot Noir and a Baco Noir?
I'm not that familiar with it. So
I know they grow
I
it
can
in
make a
Oregon
guess.
as well, but I think it's like a hybrid, isn't it?
Okay, that was going to be my guess. If it's a hybrid, the Vitis vinifera that we grow here, we all originated in France. Make great wines, but they're frost and cold susceptible. So great plant scientists made hybrids of grape varieties that could withstand that had cold hardiness, I guess. And they're hybrids, so they're part vinifera and part other types of grape, part of natural. If you the creeks of California, you'll see natural grapevines that were naturally, and it goes back to the solution for phylloxera that Rich was talking about. And so those hybrids were developed to grow in places like Canada that is colder that has a harder job actually than we do here in Napa to produce nice wines. That they'll probably bud out late, so the frost season is over, and then they ripen quickly before the winter comes again. So different variety, and I would only guess, because I don't know anything about it, that it was a hybrid to be similar to Pinot Noir.
Okay, great. While we're drinking the Pinot, Carl Cramp has a question. Thank you, he says, for all of us taking the time and sharing our knowledge. And thank you, Carl, for taking the time and tuning in with us today. He wants to know if we do any whole cluster fermenting with the Pinot Noir.
Great. Hey, Carl, how you doing? How's Margaret? You've probably heard these stories before.
Testing your knowledge.
Yeah. Just making sure the story's the same as last time I said this answer.
Todd knows everyone who drinks our wines.
We do no whole cluster in our Pinot Noir. We destem it all. We do whole berry, but we do not do whole cluster. I'm not a fan of stem contact during the fermentation. Other people are. In California, our sunlight gets our fruit ripe enough that we have plenty of phenolics in the skins, and we don't need to add it, in my opinion. The great part about this whole conversation, if there was 10 winemakers on this panel, we'd have 10 different answers, and the other 9 would be wrong. But and that's how we play out here in Napa. We're all friendly rivals. So we respect each other, but we like to argue with each other also. So we choose not to do a whole cluster because the skins add a greenness and a phenolic character that I'm actually trying to avoid, and I get plenty of it from the skins when we're fermenting.
Okay. Rich, this one's for you. John Plyler says that he loves that we've named all the vineyards after the grandchildren. And he would like you to share a little more about the history of the winery and the vineyards.
Okay, well, let me start where we're sitting. And for all of those who can't tell, I took off my jacket. It stopped drizzling. We're sitting on Winston Hill. This is property we purchased back in 1990 when I was still at Disney Studios. While I was running the studio there, I had the opportunity to travel around the world, and because of the title I had, people who ran networks and studios around the world always wanted to take me out to dinner, and they always wanted to show off the wines they had. And I really started loving Bordeaux's and Burgundies, and sort of became a fan of wine, but focus on California wines or Napa wines. And when I came back, it was always a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job, as they say. And I was stuck in Los Angeles. And I came a couple of times up to Napa and just found that 2 hours from Los Angeles, I was in the middle of heaven up here, and a great wine industry was here, and they were making really fine wines. And I purchased this property, Winston Hill, in 1990, mainly because of 1930, their house that sits on the property with a beautiful view, and had about 8 acres of vines that were planted. And My idea was to travel back and forth from Los Angeles on an occasional weekend and maybe a week or two for holidays or some time in the summer if I could get away. And I found out rapidly, as we had a replant for phylloxera like everybody else, that this was a pretty spectacular vineyard. I wish I could tell you that I picked it because of how great the vineyard is, but Todd can talk about that a little more. But a spectacular vineyard, and we just started growing it out, and it's still our home. We fixed up the house. We've built took an old barn, and it's where we're sitting outside right now, and made it an area to just enjoy barbecuing. And you can see the vineyard right behind us. It's this beautiful southwest facing sloping hillside vineyard in the middle of Rutherford. So I don't know if you want to talk about the vineyard a little bit, Todd, but it was nothing planned. And I'll talk in a minute about the winery, but that's how Winston Hill got started. And Winston was our little black and white Springer Spaniel at the time, who loved running around and chasing the birds and actually thinking he would catch one. Never happened, but we thought we would name it Winston Hill after his enjoyment of the property.
So this is a very spectacular vineyard. We're very fortunate to make wine off of it. You can see kind of the natural terrace going up the hillside. The block behind us is a replant, and it's vertical. It's going to be the new way. The whole vineyard will be replanted in the distant future. We hope in the distant future, as long as everything stays healthy. But I would argue it's a top 5 Cabernet vineyard in Napa Valley. We make some spectacular wines from here. The RAF and the Rutherford Reserve have a base here. And then obviously Winston Hill and Patriarch come from here. And the Sangiovese up the top. We can't see it from here, but it's over the next ridge. It's kind of a 3-step vineyard going down from the Silverado Trail up to the top of the hill. Great Cabernet. I always say, just once I make the picking decision, just get out of the way and let the wine do itself, because I can only make it if I make too many decisions. Just let the wine do itself. The vineyard's self-regulating. We don't have to control the quantity very much. It's volcanic rock up here. If you look up here, you'll see the rocks, and we do have irrigation here if needed, but we say we just borrow the water because it just keeps going through. It doesn't really stick and stay around. So we just give them a little drink once in a while when needed. And then it's an earlier ripening Cabernet vineyard too, which is great. So it's always a secure come in that we're going to get it in time. And when we're kind of still fresh, and we can give everything the best effort.
Great.
Should we taste the
Todd, Lisa Knowles is asking, first of all, she says, thank you to Frank family. This is great. And while she greatly appreciates the Pinot Noir, she adores the Reserve Pinot Noir. So could you educate us on the difference? And she says, fingers crossed, we'll be able to do the brunch in the vineyard. Oh, Lisa, we're hoping. That's later in May, but we have to see how all of this plays out. So we haven't canceled it yet, but there may be a possibility we have to, but we'll keep you posted. So Todd, the Reserve Pinot Noir.
Great. Well, we're going to do the breakfast. Everybody just gets a table to themselves. So,
Right.
So yeah,
6 feet apart.
Yeah, 6 foot rounds. We'll be out there. So the Reserve Pinot, and I'm going to go back a step even and go to Reserve Chardonnay also. So both from the Lewis Vineyard, Carneros Vineyard. So Rich and Leslie's vineyard, named after Lewis, down in Carneros. We back 04, there was 10 acres of fallow, and I had the opportunity to plant Noir in it. So we planted 10 acres of Pinot. So, and the Chardonnay was already planted. So on the 2 of the knolls, we make a vineyard designate from the Lewis Vineyard also for the Chardonnay. 2 knolls we farm that way. And then the Lewis Reserve Pinot all comes from that vineyard also. Where the wine we're tasting today, the Carneros blend, many growers, a little of the Frank family wine in there too, but many other growers, where the reserves are vineyard designate, 100% from our vineyard. 3 different French Dijon clones in that reserve wine, just 1 clone in the Chardonnay for the reserve, where the blends, multiple growers, multiple clones, a little more diversity. And I'd say, I guess, the reserve's a little more purity in there.
Okay, why don't we move on to the cab and we can talk about whatever falls in with that.
Great. So hopefully you have at least a Cabernet open or 2, and not sure what the weather is like where you're at, but this is Cabernet drinking weather right here. A little rain, and again, it all comes down to winery style, house style, family style, and I think you'll see the Chardonnay, very typical of Chardonnay. Pinot Noir, typical of Pinot Noir. Cabernet, this is a quintessential Napa cab. It has about 10% Merlot in it and a little splash of Petit Verdot and Cabernet Franc. So 4 of the main Bordeaux varietals that we blend into this. The fruit, mainly from the town of Napa North all the way to Calistoga, is a blend of this. Many different growers. This is about 50% though from Rutherford, which is in the heart of the Napa Valley. The 2 vineyards that we own that make up the majority of it. The first one, S&J Vineyard, named after Stella and Jeremy, grandchildren again.
I was going to give them credits right around now. I'm sure they're watching because I saw a question from Daryl at the beginning. So, hi guys.
That's on the eastern flank of Atlas Peak. High altitude, a little later ripening, more extreme up there. And then the newest vineyard, part of our portfolio, is the Benjamin Vineyard. And then I pass the baton.
Pass to me. Okay, we can tell you. Benjamin's our youngest grandson. It was a vineyard that Leslie and I were able to purchase. It became available. It was a 100-year-old vineyard that had been farmed by the Woods family for 100 years. They didn't make wine. They only sold. It's surrounded by Camus. Round pond, and it became available the weekend that Leslie and I were leaving on our honeymoon, and everybody in the valley tried to buy this vineyard, and every night after dinner in Tuscany, I got on the phone.
You would get on a conference call.
Yes, on a conference call to try to convince them to sell us this vineyard, and we were able to get it. It's become a key part of the overall Frank family vineyards. And we were able to name it after our now 9-year-old grandson, Benjamin.
It's hard to believe.
It's hard to believe. It's also hard to believe that Stella's in college in Wisconsin and Jeremy's starting to decide where he wants to go to school.
And Stella's old enough to be drinking along with us. That's scary.
We don't tell anybody that he
old.
drinks.
Linda Hawkinson says she likes your philosophy on drinking wine rich. And I think that goes back to your comment about you wouldn't know what to do with half a bottle because you've never had half a bottle left over. So
it goes along also with my saying, which I said yesterday, a meal without wine is called breakfast.
Right. Michael Aldi is here for round 2 and says thank you. Todd, you're talking about Cabernet. I think Michael's a wine club member because he's asking if you can discuss the difference between the Rutherford versus the Calistoga versus the Mount Veeder Cabernets. And 2 of those are wine club wines.
Great question. So 3 very distinctly different growing regions. So it's all about location, location, location. Mount Veeder is on the Miamis Mountains, so west of us. So the Miamis Mountains are what separate Napa Valley versus Sonoma Valley. And we picked the grapes up there from a grower on the top of the hill, and it's actually a little cooler up there. Calistoga, another great vineyard on a eastern benchland in Calistoga, it's a little warmer up there. We get from a grower up there. And then Rutherford is right in the heart of the valley, and that's a little blend of a little Winston Hill, a little Benjamin, and a little Beckstoffer George III. So it's all Rutherford. I kind of joke that they're all kind of a par 5 from each other.
Okay, let's taste this.
So this is the Napa Valley blend. So where those are more Appalachian specific, this comes from the town of Napa, north of Calistoga. Again, family style is balance, and more balance. And I think you'll see that there's a richness to it. There's nice length to it. There's great aromatics.
It finishes really long. It just stays with you if you take a sip. Just the tannins aren't overbearing. It's just a nice long 30-second to 60-second finish on the back of your tongue.
These are great examples. And again, all of these were a French oak house. All of them aged in French oak. The Chardonnay and Pinot Noir a little under a year, 9 to 10 months. Where the Cabernet is closer to 2 years, so 20 months to 2 years of aging in barrel. A little more structure, a little richer wine, so it can handle the barrel a little longer. What's great about these wines, the Chardonnay and Pinot, Chardonnay and Cab in specific, have been historically on the Wine and Spirits restaurant pool. So they're readily available in all the restaurants throughout all 50 states, and we're very proud of that.
I just want to say one thing. Todd keeps on mentioning barrels. He takes these very seriously. The biggest expenditure the winery has every year is in purchasing barrels. A French oak barrel will run someplace between $900 and $1,200, depending on the exchange rate in a given year. They're usable for 1, 2, 3, 4 years tops. A barrel only makes about 25 cases, 26 cases of wine. They're very expensive. And Todd purchases from 7, 8, 9 different, 10, 11, 12 barrel makers. In fact, we took the entire production staff, with Todd took us in this past April. We went to France and we visited the barrel makers so that we could see what they were doing, what trees they come from, how the lumber is cut, how it's dried out, how it sits out, how long before the barrels are made, how good a craftsman the various barrel makers are. It's a giant industry, one that we sort of mentioned casually to say barrel, but it's a big decision for us, for Todd, really, for me, because I have to sign the check. It's got a huge influence on the wines we're drinking, because all of our wines are French oak. There is American oak. It's not a flavor we particularly like. Others may use it. It would be much better for our bottom line if we can make these wines with American oak, because they're about half the price. But French oak is really what does it on our wines, and I think they show up, and it makes the wines taste a little better.
Yeah, what a difference a year makes. I think last year we were just getting back from France, and this year we wouldn't be able to go.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, any other questions,
Okay.
Leslie?
Yes, we have many other questions. So Todd, Sanjeev Moore is asking, he says he only drinks red wine. His wife only drinks white wine. Can you describe why the reds can be aged and most whites cannot? Thanks for doing it. He loves our wines.
Great, yes. So it all becomes to the compounds in the grape that are called phenolics, tannins. And red wines have they're semi-anti-preservatives, so they help preserve the wine, and they give structure to the wine. And red wines, the pigments in the skins, they have it. Chardonnay obviously doesn't have it, and that's the main difference. It's the compounds in the skins that allow that to happen. We get our color from there, but we also get that ageability from that also.
Yeah, just keep in mind that all grape juice, except for maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, is white. The color comes from the skin contact, which is why you ferment the wines differently once they're picked. But if you squeezed a Cabernet grape, it would basically be white wine. It's the color that comes from the skins And that's what gives it also the tannins and staying ability.
We have a couple of questions about, well, we have someone anonymous who's watching, and they're wondering, are there differences between buying our wines directly or buying them from a local retailer? And the difference is we don't have all of our wines available in retail. Rich, maybe you can elaborate on that.
Right. We have to choose how you distribute. The wines we're tasting with you today, the Chard, the Pinot, the Cabernet, and we're not tasting the Zinfandel, but the Zinfandel is the fourth. We call it our core four wines. They should be in every city and every town that anybody's looking today. You should be able to find that at your local packaged goods store, your local restaurants, finer distributors. We then make our estate wines. We call them reserves, but they come off of property we own or we exclusively make because they're only made from, as Todd was saying, a particular grower who we like working with. We make a wine with them. Those are only available at the winery or through our wine club. That's one of the reasons people join clubs. They get to taste various different wines that are exclusive and only sold at the winery on our wine club. And as I started saying that, we're really getting rained on now. I'm going to put on my jacket. Todd is sitting under an umbrella, and I am not.
Most importantly, just
Todd
watch
can
my
go on
computer
while
and
I
make
put
sure that
on my
doesn't
wig.
get too wet.
The computer is dry.
My
got the
computer's
first
dry,
choice.
we're all good.
Tell me, vote how funny I look like this, but
I think
shows you
it's
that-
okay. We wanted to give folks a
it
different
shows
view
you
of
that the winemaker is protected. The owner sits in the rain.
I had first choice of chairs. Yeah.
So here's a great question, and one we get asked a lot. This is from Randy Chan. How do you know when to open or save or age a wine? Is buying multiple quantities of the same bottle and opening one every year the only way to know?
That is the best way. I try to recommend to anybody, whatever, everybody's budget's a little different, but hopefully they've tasted the wine first, like coming to visit the tasting room. And if they've tasted it and said, we like it, whatever their budget allows, if it's 2 bottles, 3 bottles, if it's a case, that's great. But honestly, that's the best way to watch it. Every vintage is a little different. And again, we'll go to that bell curve. The wines, just like people, start out pretty young. They go through the awkward stage, then they hit their prime, and you hope that good plateau, and then they start going down the hill. And the way it's personal preference, and the way you know is open it. Do you like more fruit? Drink it earlier. Do you like more dried fruit? So a Cabernet with plum, for example. Plum is a great example. If you like plum, do you like prune? Let it age a little. Go to Chardonnay. Do you like fresh pear, or do you like dried pear? A fresh apple versus dried apple. That's what aging will do. And honestly, the best is probably the mix of the two, in my opinion. But I always advise people, if you're going to make a mistake, make it on the early side. Don't make it on the late side. There's plenty of wines out there. And you don't need to save it for your anniversary. Wednesday's a good night sometimes, if you have that one bottle. Different varieties, Cabernet's the king, the classic ageability. Some great Pinots, reds again. White wine's a little more, drink a little more youthful. Chardonnay is probably the best aging white, but you have, there's exceptions to all the rules, so I'm speaking in generalities. But, nice wines like Pinot Gris, Sauvignon Blanc, some young, lighter Rieslings, Albariños, drink those early. But the best way to know is to have a few, and you'll see, taste it on the rise and go, oh, I think it could go a little bit. because there's nothing better when you hit it right. And we really don't know, but we can say Cabernet a little more likely, Chardonnay, white wine's a little less likely to run for a long time.
And I will say that when Todd comes over for dinner, whatever wines I pulled out, he looks at them, he grabs me, goes down in my basement, goes to the cellar, and he pulls out older wines and says to me, "You have all these great older wines, why aren't you drinking them?" So yes, we tend to buy wines, we put them away, and we don't think about what we might have in the cellar. And some of them with a few out years age on them are really worthwhile drinking, as opposed to grabbing just what you've just purchased or what just came in the wine club.
And that's another good thing is storage. Not everybody has a great wine cellar like Rich and Leslie. I've converted my garage, insulated air conditioner. It's not perfect, but it's good. Some people have a closet, an interior closet. It wants consistency. It wants stable. You don't want it to get hot and cold. You don't want the fluctuation. You want it consistent. And don't worry if a wine did get hot, don't throw it away. Just drink it right away. It's going to prematurely age, so drink it. It'll probably be really good then. But I wouldn't, if it got really hot, I wouldn't save it for anniversary 20 years from now or a child celebration. Drink them. If you own them, open them. The worst thing you do is not like it. And if it's a wine, if it's a storage issue or an age issue, if you're aging wines and storing wines, you must have more than one. So, go to the next one.
We're going to go to Leslie now, but I just want to say I'm looking at you on the TV. You look exactly like Garth Brooks. Do you sing?
Who? No, but I did listen to
like Garth Brooks.
Yeah,
I thought you were saying I did.
Yeah. Yeah, who are you talking to?
All right, Leslie, you're on.
Okay, so Rich, I know that you love a Cabernet. You're a cab man for sure. Douglas McCann has a question for Todd. He's asking, Todd, what's your favorite varietal to work with and why?
I need to come up with a good line for this. I feel fortunate that I get to work with a lot of them.
We only have 3 minutes to go, but it is raining.
A few minutes.
Okay.
We've got a poll. We're going to do a poll after this.
The group's bringing out the tarp right now. They're bringing out the tarp. So I like
praying for this.
Yeah, I like that.
Come on, this is a really high-end production we've got going here.
Do your poll.
All right. Okay. Let's do the poll here. Our poll questions. Number one, yesterday, the majority of you voted for Cabernet Sauvignon as the focus for our next virtual tasting. What would you like to see? Tasting of all current releases, library tasting, particular. Oh, I have to launch it. There we go. Sorry. Okay, I've launched it. Now you can read along with me. Number two, do you think 3 wines is a good amount for a virtual tasting? Number 3, would you be interested in wine and cheese virtual tasting? And number 4, who has funnier jokes? Rich, Leslie.
It was supposed to be Rich or Todd.
It's okay. This is a good one to...
we did get a question. Let me go back in here.
Todd wins.
I have a couple that I didn't have an opportunity to get to, but I'm going to go back here. Bear with me here. We had a question from a gentleman who asked about one-on-one virtual tastings. And, Larry Jordan, you asked, do you all plan to offer private reserve virtual tastings in the future? We would love to book one if you will. The answer is yes. And you will be getting an email this week regarding those virtual tastings, because obviously we're living in unprecedented times and we want to be able to connect with you, and this is the great way to do it. So next time we can do it one-on-one so that we can taste the wines that you're interested in tasting. And you'll be getting an email on that later this week. So thanks, Larry. It's a great idea. We love the idea, and we're on the same page here because we're going to do that. So, okay. So can I end the poll now, Marissa? Yes. Okay. I'm going to end the poll, and let's see what the results are. Number 1. Yesterday, the majority voted for Cabernet Sauvignon, the focus of our next version. Okay, the majority of people, it's kind of even. They'd like to taste the current releases, and half want to taste a library tasting. So it's 50-50. Okay, do you think, am I doing this right? Yeah, okay. Number 2, do you think 3 wines is a good amount of taste for a virtual tasting? And 79% of you said yes, 3 wines is perfect. And number 3, would you be interested in a wine and cheese virtual tasting? 89% of you said yes, sign me up. And who was likes jokes? Oh, Richie, you're a comedian and you didn't even know it. You win, 54%.
Todd makes the wine, and I'm the
Todd, you and I are kind of like, we tied, so. Anyway,
this is just
thank you so much. This was wonderful. I'm really glad that I got to be inside today. You guys are outside, but we are loving the view, and it's a gorgeous vineyard that produces some beautiful grapes, which Todd turns into beautiful wine. And we're thrilled that we got to share virtually our wines with you today. We're going to continue to do this, and again, you know, this is new for us. We're kind of flying by the seat of our pants today. So we'll do it more, and we'll get better as we go. But send us your emails, and we're so grateful that you're here to taste with us virtually. Until next time, thank you, and cheers, everyone.
Hope to see you out here at the winery soon. Yep. Be safe and healthy. Yeah. Thank you.